Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the media. And I must start off with an apology, first of all, for keeping you waiting. And that relates to really a matter that concerns us on this side of the table in terms of our own challenges of coordination towards this press briefing. The second apology relates to the other presiding officers who are unable to be here. In particular, the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces was called back to the province very urgently, so she was already around and she had to go back. Now, the issues we think are important to address you about relate to the question of tightening up of the rules in order to enable members of parliament to exercise their right without being disrupted by other members who might, as they see it, be exercising what they also see as their rights. After an incident where, as you are aware, the last question day of the president could not be proceeded with because of disruptions in the House, we convened the Rules Committee, which is in fact the structure that is provided for by the Constitution, to make sure that it provides for necessary rules and mechanisms in order for Parliament to deliver on its constitutional expectations. That Rules Committee discussed the need for such a rule or rules to be looked at a technical level, brought to the subcommittee of the Rules Committee, and finally to the Rules Committee when we get back to Parliament in terms of sittings as of next week, early next week. At this point, unfortunately, we're not in a position to share with you a text of what the rules would be, because they need to first be seen by the appropriate structures. As I say, the Rules Committee itself would have a meeting on Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock in order for it to have a look at the work that would have been done by this time at a technical and other levels, because as you know, the subcommittee of the Rules Committee met yesterday. So we want to correct a misunderstanding we have picked up within the media, where as South Africans call in to certain radio stations, we detect a total misunderstanding of what is behind this exercise that we are embarked on. There's a tendency to cast the issues that have necessitated this exercise as being about not allowing members of Parliament to express a different view, which in fact really is perhaps the other way around. If you had watched the incident on the day of the President's questions, we adjourned the House in order to allow the whips of all parties to meet, to look at the situation, to apply their minds collectively, and to come back. And we allowed them, when they were back in the House, to express their views in the open, which we hadn't been told before they did that in the House, in the full glare of the South African society. we received from all the whips who got up in the House a clear position and view that they totally were against what had happened, which was the disruption of the president being able to answer questions. And they felt very strongly that they had to make it clear that even though some of them were saying yes, they would have a view that says the president maybe should pay or whatever the view that they had. But what they were against was that the position in relation to the business of that particular day was disrupted by one of the opposition parties. So as we went into the Rules Committee, which we then convened, as I said earlier, those parties, again, very strongly made it clear they needed a protection from the insistence of one party to disrupt the business of the House and therefore block them to also exercise their right to represent those who had voted for them to come and play a role in Parliament. And so the work that would have happened between then and now, as we are going back to Parliament, is work that is based on the fact that the majority of the parties expressed themselves in that Rules Committee and made it clear that they needed rules to protect their right to play their role in Parliament as having been elected by the South African electorate. So basically those are the issues. It's not about the fact that there's a particular view taken by others and that we're trying to block them from expressing their right. It's more a question of, yes, having allowed that view to be expressed, but recognizing and respecting the rights of other MPs who had a different view under the circumstances. So, in fact, it is anticipated that on the 28th, the Rules Committee will receive a report on what is being proposed. What are the amendments to the rules that are being proposed? And then that would then be amended, the text would be amended and taken to the House for adoption by the plenary. In other words, it is that test of the actual voting in the House that will tell us how the parties, how the balance is in terms of the views of the political parties that are participating in Parliament in terms of the issues that are before us at the moment. Because it cannot be that because you scream loudest, you are able to have people pay attention to you. You are necessarily voicing the views of everybody who's participating within Parliament, and therefore you are the one with the correct view. I'm talking about the different political parties that are participants in the process of parliamentary work. So it really was to make sure that we make that clear, that the work we are doing is about ensuring that the rules are enabling all participants, all political parties, all members of Parliament to express their views, not just a particular tendency or those that have a particular perspective as to how they play their own role in Parliament. So basically, that's what we thought we should put at the disposal of the members of the media, so we enable them when they report on these matters to have that particular context of what it is that had happened and what we are now doing. The last thing I want to mention is that the process of amendment of rules. Anyone who had listened to our budget vote speech would know that we did talk about this matter, that there has been a process. And the process, of course, had started in 1994, where at the dawn of the new South Africa, indeed, there were rules that had always been there in the previous dispensation. And we did look at them as the new people who were players in a new dispensation that was beginning to unfold. We, of course, over time had retained most of the rules. We had tinkered with some rules, and it was during the time of the fourth Parliament that Parliament revisited the issue of the rules. And indeed, a subcommittee had been formed then under the leadership and guidance of the previous presiding officers. But because of just the nature of the amendments to the rules, the process, how many steps, and how, in fact, there are consultations and interactions that are very involved and don't, in their very nature, take maybe a week or two. It has taken a long time, and the Fifth Parliament has continued with that process, and we believe we should be through with putting before everybody the whole rule book, which is 15 chapters, in an amended form. So we think that before the end of the year, we should be able to be back to everybody about the areas around which we have amended the rules, and we believe, because of course that process is a multi-party process. So you would see the debates in the subcommittee, which is a multi-party structure, but in the end, from that subcommittee, they go to the main rules committee, which is in fact the constitutional body, and you then adopt them there, and finally you take them to the House. So the amendments we are going to be taking to the House on the 30th is not yet the whole rule book. The whole rule book we are continuing tightening up, and before the end of the year we are determined that we would be able to finish and actually put before the House all the 15 chapters of the rules. But we would have also, at that point, had the other House, excuse me, that we would have had the National Council of Provinces also look at their rules, and would have together looked at the joint rules, and finally be able to adopt the new rules comprehensively of Parliament. So with that clarification and the apologies, that really is the end of my remarks, unless there are questions that we need to clarify. Thanks.